Omaha Beach was the deadliest of the D-Day beaches, and the Americans who landed on Omaha would be initially met with fierce resistance and fighting. The initial waves of the forces that landed were heavily affected, with casualties, and there were bodies lying in the sea and on the beach. There were a huge number of problems, including the tides and the roughness of the sea, and this affected the landing craft a lot. One eyewitness said of the devastation that, as we got closer to the beach, we saw the casualties were floating in the water, just like refuge in a harbour. There was this in the equipment floating, soldiers, sailors. It was very disheartening. For hours off the coast we watched the tide bring out debris and the bodies of the soldiers who had died. There were many soldiers who had no leadership and were shell-shocked, just acting as sitting ducks on Omaha, but eventually the Americans would break through. They would capture the defended points. But there was one soldier who fought for the German army, who became known for the fact it was claimed he had inflicted around 1,000 to 2,000 casualties on the American soldiers who landed on Omaha Beach on D-Day. But what is the story of this German soldier? Join us today as we look at this, and to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. On the 23rd of June 1923, Heinrich Severloh was born in Metzinger in Lüneburg Heath, around North Germany. It's believed that he was from a farming family, but on the 23rd of July 1941, at the age of 18, whilst the Second World War was raging on, Severloh was conscripted into the German army like millions of young men, and he was then assigned to be part of the 19th Light Artillery Replacement Division in Hanover. But then he would be transferred months later to serve in France and be part of the 3rd Battery of the 321st Artillery Regiment. But then in December 1942, Severloh was sent to the Eastern Front, and he would work at the rear of his division driving sleighs. But he was not a model soldier, and he would suffer with some discipline issues, and it was said he was punished for making dissenting or critical remarks about the German war effort. For this he was forced to perform physical exercises, which were so strenuous that Severloh was forced to spend 6 months in hospital recovering. But following this he then left the army briefly to return home to his family's farm to help with the harvest. But then in October 1943, Severloh was recruited by the Wehrmacht again to undertake non-commissioned officer training in Brunswick, but he then was recalled to join his unit, which had become the 352nd Infantry Division, which was based in Normandy. At the time, the Nazis knew that at some point the Allies would invade France, and they initially believed that they would target Calais, as it was the closest crossing point, but Rommel would be placed in charge of overseeing defences to prevent the incoming invasion that would be D-Day. Heinrich Severloh was part of the defence forces based in this region, but the Allies would then invade the 5 different beaches on D-Day, but the deadliest of these was Omaha, which was landed on by the Americans. The beach was heavily defended, and the defences included 8 concrete bunkers containing artillery, 35 pillboxes, 18 anti-tank guns, 6 mortar pits, 35 rocket launchers, 85 machine gun nests and 6 tank turrets, as well as thousands of infantry soldiers. But the Germans would deploy companies around 15 strongpoints, which were known as the Widerstand-Nester, or resistance nests, and these were given a WN number, with WN 60 being in the east and WN 74 being in the west. Heinrich Severloh was part of defending WN 62, which was the largest strongpoint defending Omaha, and the Americans split the beach into 10 different sectors. WN 62 overlooked codename Easy Red and Fox Green sectors, and it was 332 metres long and 324 metres wide. It was situated around 12 to 50 metres above the beach, and it had a good view of the beach area, meaning that the position that Heinrich Severloh was in on D-Day gave him an excellent view of the landings and the soldiers who were coming onto the beach. Severloh was based inside of a foxhole, and he was equipped with a machine gun. In the early morning of the 6th of June 1944, Severloh returned to his post at WN 62, and he manned his MG-42 machine gun. In front of him in the English Channel were over 34,000 American soldiers waiting to land on Omaha Beach. He would see D-Day unfolding in front of his eyes, and it was his job with his machine gun to fire upon the Allies. Severloh's weapon, the MG-42, was capable of firing 1,200 rounds a minute, and was found 7 metres from the entrance of an observation post. His job was to protect his officer and coordinate fire on targets, which he saw through a telescope. Heinrich was told to wait until the American soldiers were knee-deep in the water and to then open fire, and this caused a huge amount of panic as he opened up the gun on the Allies who were struggling. Many tried to shelter behind anything they could, including hiding even behind dead bodies. As the American forces came closer, the targets were easier to hit, and every time a landing craft dropped the ramp, 30 soldiers who were targets were fired upon by Heinrich Severloh. There was a brief lull in the waves of soldiers arriving, but this allowed the barrel of the gun to cool, but it had been swapped regularly as Severloh continued to fire thousands of rounds at the Allied invaders. When the barrel was being swapped, he would shoot at the enemy with his Kar 98, and he claimed that he shot 400 times using this. He continued to shoot at the targets, and he was the only machine gun firing on this part of the beach. He recalled on D-Day that there were several waves of around 10 to 15 landing craft on his part of the beach, and he tried to fire at any soldier who also jumped over the sides of the boats and the vessels. During one attack, an American soldier who had a flamethrower on his back for bunker clearance arrived on the beach, and he sheltered behind a concrete block, but Severloh aimed his machine gun at him and killed this man through a shot at the top of his helmet. After each burst of fire, the sight of soldiers collapsing in numbers from his weapon continued, and he claimed that this had a profound effect upon him. His firing upon the American soldiers continued to the point where he ran out of bullets, firing his 12,000 machine gun allocation upon the enemy, and he then had to use tracer bullets which were less lethal, and also highlighted where he actually was. This led to American warships possibly trying to target him, but a shell would then explode in front of him, in front of his machine gun position, and Severloh sustained a facial wound. By 3 PM on D-Day the decision was made to abandon WN-62 as the Allies were advancing and pushing forward. Severloh was ordered out first, and his officers said he would follow, and he ran down a trench carrying his hot machine gun and ammunition. He ran through the German lines with the least resistance, and he kept his head down, and managed to get to WN-63, where first aid was administered. But Heinrich Severloh retreated to the village of Colleville-sur-Mer, and the next day he would surrender. His commanding officer, Lieutenant Frerking, would be killed by the Americans at the post at WN-62 that he was defending. Heinrich Severloh would state of his actions on D-Day that it was definitely at least 1,000 men, most likely more than 2,000, but I do not know how many men I shot. It was awful. Thinking about it makes me want to throw up. He would later be sent to Boston in the United States as a prisoner of war, would then be sent to England to work as a forced labourer building roads. Eventually, in March 1947, Heinrich Severloh would be repatriated back to Germany. He became known as a Beast of Omaha for his actions, but his claims that he shot and inflicted at least around 1,000 to 2,000 casualties have been questioned. He claimed that he inflicted between 40 to 80% of all casualties on Omaha himself, and that for every 13th to 7th round fired by him, he would have hit an American soldier. He was an accurate shot with his weapon, and there is no questioning that he slaughtered American soldiers on the shingle and on the beach, and he would have seen bodies laying all over this part of the beach. His prediction and admission about the numbers of American soldiers he killed was based around what he saw, and how he saw the bodies piled up in his line of fire, but the estimates of the fact he killed thousands were a little off. Many of the soldiers in his sight may have also been killed by the water in the English Channel, as they were dropped off in too deep water, or they may have drowned. Many of those who died may have also been victims of artillery shells, mortar bombs and other machine guns and weapons being fired from the defenders aimed at the sea. Heinrich Severloh became known as a Beast of Omaha, and he would write and speak out about his actions on Omaha on D-Day, and he would speak out about the guilt he had on that beachhead. His contributions to the Second World War was something that he would rather not have been involved in, and he lived with his conscience that he caused a huge amount of slaughter. Heinrich Severloh died in January 2006 at the age of 82, but his claims that it was definitely at least 1,000 men, most likely more than 2,000, but I do not know how many men are shot. It was awful. Thinking about it wants to make me throw up. It's rather chilling. There is without any doubt that he was responsible for the deaths of dozens of American soldiers on Omaha Beach. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, Thank you so much for watching.